Thank you. So I wanted to quickly introduce our panelists. So we have Will Feltis at National Media. He's the Senior Vice President there, and it's a nationally recognized leader in media research, planning, and placement for issue advocacy, corporate, and political clients. He is also the author of a new textbook, Inside Campaigns, published by Sage. And he's an innovator in developing research-based methods for targeting political customers. And Steve Passwaiter from Kantar Media CMAG, sorry. He's the VP and General Manager there, the Political Ad Intelligence Unit located here in DC. Steve has a broad background in television, media sales management, consulting, and research. So thanks so much for joining the panel. I hope that this discussion is exciting and lively. And so to kick it off, I mean, I think as we all know, this was part of the introduction, more and more people are, watching TV in a variety of different ways, in a variety of different methods. In addition, they're also watching TV while holding a second device that they may be consulting during programs or during commercial breaks. So as targeting becomes more and more sophisticated in the world of both TV and digital, we want to explore how those two tactics sort of overlap. So I'd love to ask, how are you seeing newer tactics like programmatic TV, OTT, and digital video come into play with your media plans?
Over the past several years, we've used all those methods, but they have yet to revolutionize political media buying. Right now, there's things at the margin, largely, and I know it's not very exciting, but political media buying in the next cycle is going to be 85% like political media buying was in the last cycle, just by the numbers. I mean, I think the key number to look at is what is the size of the cord-cut, unconnected voter universe out there. So typically we would define that as someone who doesn't have cable, doesn't have like telco, Fios or something, or doesn't have satellite. Mm-hmm. And if you look at the Nielsen-Scarborough surveys, in the last presidential, I'm guessing about 20% of high turnout voters were cord cutters. And I took like the trend, and the trend of cord cutting has gone up over the last couple of cycles. It's not going up like this, but it's going up. And I sort of tried to extrapolate out. So I'm guessing in the next presidential, we'll be up from 20% to 30 to 35% of high turnout voters who would be cord cutters.
But that's still a pretty big percentage
yes.
of the voting
No,
population. So how are you working into your media plans ways to reach those voters?
Well, if you look at the top quintile of users of streaming video, like in a typical day, they would consume 30 minutes of streaming video. This is about a year ago, according to the Nielsen multi-screen study.
Right.
But that same top quintile of heavy streamers is consuming like 230 minutes a day of regular old TV, linear TV. So broadcast television still gets to cord cutters, obviously. But you do need to, there will be, in the next presidential cycle, there'll be many more ways to use over-the-top television to get to voters. And the exciting thing about over-the-top television, even though it doesn't have a big reach right now, is that it's targetable in the way that digital advertising is. Mm-hmm. The impressions are much more expensive, but it is targetable.
Yeah, I'll just echo what Will said, since we watch all this political advertising go on. I think with OTT, it's the promise of OTT. At the moment, it doesn't scale very well. But once you get Comcast aboard, well, Comcast is aboard, and then you start to get Spectrum, which is the old-time Warner and Charter combination, and Altice, and you get that. Now all of a sudden you do have some of that scale. But, I think to what Will was saying before, I think if we believe that the era of linear television is over in political, I think we're massively diluting ourselves here. It still works, it still gets used. I mean, we're projecting somewhere around $2.5 billion worth of regular old broadcast TV getting used this year. And, Will's right, I saw the same study that, that top quintile of users of streaming video are still watching an awful lot of, good old television, if you will. So I think, there's probably going to be some consistency. And, as an old TV guy, everybody thinks I've got skin in that game, and I assure you I don't. But I think, you're going to still look at TV as being the king of political spending. Its share is likely to wobble, but there's so much money in the system now that it just seems almost suicidal to knock TV out. And I think a lot of folks thought after watching the presidential election in 2016, there was probably some thought that, well, gosh, look how little television was done by the winning candidate, and does that mean that we're kind of over the age of television? And a bunch of nervous campaign consultants went, no.
That's a presidential campaign.
Yeah.
That people actually pay attention to.
Yeah. Right.
TV's more important for a congressional or mayor's race or statewide race.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think to that end, if you ask the folks from NCC about 2018, they're looking at having a bigger year than they had in 2016, and I suspect, and Will can confirm that or tell me I'm wrong, but I think as the races tend to get a little bit closer to home, I think that helps them. But they're projecting a number that is in excess of what they did in 2016.
Yeah, that's the NCC is the National Cable Communications. They're basically the rep firm for local cable spot advertising. And just to give you an idea of like historical change, so in 2004, when National Media, we were doing the Bush campaign, and we became the first presidential campaign to buy cable, if you can believe that, in 2004. Kerry did not buy any cable. We decided we liked cable so much we bought the network, which the NCC didn't like because they wanted us to buy spot cable. But 2004 to now is 13 years, and it took that long for cable. I mean, what do you think spot cable is now? Typically, maybe 30% of the TV spend, something like that?
I think that's right. I mean, when we looked at Georgia 6 earlier this year, we had local cable at about, I think, right around 30% of the total spend, based on what we could see out of it. Yeah.
I mean, even though people spend more time watching ad-supported cable than they do ad-supported broadcast, broadcast still gets the lion's share. And one reason is just, boring local news, which everybody jams too many commercials into. But if you look at the trends to news consumption over the past 10 years, like cable news is down, but local news, it's down a little bit, but nothing like, watching cable news.
Yeah, and I think there's a credibility factor that puts a tailwind behind local TV news. And I think, when you look at surveys out there, people will tend to indicate that that's a news source they trust implicitly. And I think that helps them out a lot. And I think just sometimes the nature of the electorate skewing as it does, a little bit older also doesn't hurt that local news thing at all. So, so I think that those obviously are assets that local news has that I think helps it keep the share it has.
So one of the advantages that digital has, which I think is moving more into the TV world, is targeting, and the ability to target, to really get more granular with your segments, as well as the ability to look at metrics in a way that you're not always able to do in TV. How has that part of TV buying changed? Like, are you seeing more of that kind of what we kind of traditionally think of as digital targeting and metrics move into the TV space?
Not now. I mean, because in traditional TV, there's no feedback loop like it is in digital. So we can only, surmise whether somebody actually paid attention to or emotionally interacted with our ad. You can see that on digital. I mean, there's some exceptions, addressable, you get a clear idea of the reporting on addressable has gotten better, so you can see like what homes your spot went into. You can't tell if it was watched or not.
What about sort of, are you doing any sort of testing, using digital as sort of a testing ground for any of your TV in terms of messaging?
Oh yeah, that's a common practice. It's been up for a while. Is that the way a show would go to New Haven before it went to Broadway, people will put their TV ads up on some limited digital distribution before they show them on television.
Yeah, I think, it's something Will said before about OTT, right? Therein lies that digital promise of having that feedback loop and the ability to understand more about who's consumed the ad, where it's landed. That kind of information becomes much more readily available in an over-the-top environment, which ultimately tends to make it much more parallel with how the digital experience goes. And the digital experience as well. I mean, I don't know how you feel, Will, because you guys are buying this, but more often than not, it seems like video, no matter where you put it, is the killer app. Yeah. There's just no substitute for video. You can pretty much show it anywhere in this world, and people, you put it in an elevator and people stop and watch it. So, once again, video just constantly, it's sort of venue agnostic. It grabs attention.
The gas pump.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Right, and that's technically on the back end considered a digital, right? A digital tactic when you're buying the gas pump TV or the taxi TV and stuff. But as we talked about kind of on our call to prep for this, for the end user, that's really just another TV experience. So how are you kind of on the back end melding your digital teams with your traditional media teams and making sure you're kind of giving the end user the same experience, even though they may come from two different departments?
Well, we don't, I don't know if it's important that the end user get the same experience if they're watching the spot on TV or if they're watching it, over the top or some other digital video delivery. I mean, for example, if I had my druthers, I would have all digital video be 15 seconds instead of 30, just because, you have a 30-second TV spot, which is building up to your closer message, and these people are gonna stop it after, 9 seconds. If you can let them, I'll wait 15 seconds, or I'll pay attention to it for 15 seconds if I've gotta watch it, but that's one example of why the TV experience can't be just like the digital experience.
Yeah, I think there's some truth to that. If you look at anything that's happening in the digital world, the video experience is getting shorter as far as commercials are concerned. I mean, we're running 6-second commercials now, which have now made their way into football games on the broadcast network. So it seems, even in the recent Virginia governor's race, we noticed there were digital-only 15-second ads that were done on behalf of the Northam campaign by Priorities and League of Conservation Voters and Planned Parenthood, where they actually did not take TV video and try to cram it into the digital experience. They said, no, we'll do 15s. The theme was consistent with what was being done on broadcast, but it was completely different creative, and they were 15s. And they were, I think, rather effective. So, you know, I think the days of trying to take TV video and repurpose it for the web, I hope is dying a gruesome death, because I don't think ultimately that's the best use for video on digital devices.
I listened to some of the sessions this morning, streaming, and I heard people talking about that, you know, there's a new generation of video producer who's not your traditional, you know, TV guru, expensive guy, and they can take rough footage, possibly shot by the principal TV guy, and B-roll, and, you know, crank out inexpensive, short digital video.
Do you think that might be going the opposite direction? You know, for a long time, digital, we were taking, as you mentioned, TV ads and kind of making them work for digital streaming video. Are you seeing trends, as you mentioned, the Northam campaign putting 15-second digital-only campaign ads out? Do you think maybe in 2018 we'll see a lot more of that, where there are more digital-first kind of videos that are running not only on digital platforms, but as well on broadcast and to cable? Maybe some 6-second, 3-second
Yeah, I like 6
ads,
seconds. Yeah,
snackable video. That's
try to change a channel before this ad's over. 6 seconds.
There's 3-second snackable ads too. You can get into that and do it
3
really
seconds.
quickly. Yeah.
So like time and temperature? Those
Basically,
TD
the TD Bank.
Yeah.
They pioneered it, actually. Just kidding. So are there some challenges that you see? I mean, it's obviously it sounds like TV is still the king and it's not going anywhere. But are there some challenges that you see TV has that kind of digital can fill that void, or help solve some issues that TV might have?
Well, I mean, you know, every form of media has issues. You know, it's just not TV. And what we preach to our clients is that you've got to have, you know, a diversified media mix. You can't, you know, there used to be in the old days when TV was, you know, king and dictator, that the TV consultant who still is the biggest, you know, consultant in the room typically, that the tradition was you got to fill up that TV bucket all the way to the top before you spend any money on radio. And I think radio is the most underused secret weapon. When you talk about the problems with TV, one of the best ways to fix it is with radio. If, you know, that.
Some radio fans in the audience.
I mean, Neil, isn't radio the most used medium among 18 to 34-year-old adults? Yes. Yeah, not over the top, but just radio, you know?
Does that include digital radio, like Pandora or Spotify, terrestrial?
Just terrestrial. I mean, and we do buy we like to buy Pandora and all that also, but just good old-fashioned radio, which is so easy to do, but again, you can't take your 30-second TV spot. You have to make a spot, because radio is a very one-on-one medium, you know.
So when measuring, I think a lot of times, coming from the digital world, one thing that we often face as a challenge is campaigns thinking in terms of GRPs and wanting to see what a digital plan, what does that translate to into GRPs? And, you know, are you guys thinking of GRPs in terms of targeted CPMs now, or kind of thinking of a way that we can kind of drill down to how much is it really costing?
Yeah, well,
this impression.
Impressions is the name of the game. So you present your media plan in impressions, and the same media math that works for TV is the same math that works for digital, radio, print. I mean, it's impressions, and then gross ratings points are impressions expressed as a % of a population. And then you can calculate, using different research methods, you can estimate your cost per 1,000 target impressions across media. So that's one way to compare, you know, the higher cost of doing digital media, which is more targetable, but it costs me more, versus old-fashioned TV, which I can target, which I can steer, right? I can maybe get a 20% lift through some kind of research, and you compare the cost per target impressions across media, and then you make a decision on how you're going to split your money up. You don't put it all on the cheapest cost per target impression, but you have to make a judgment at some point about how to split it out.
Yeah, I think there's been a move afoot, and it's been going on for several years now, where, you know, there's some of this media that's traditionally been bought on a cost per point basis. And when I was selling television around the time Marconi got going, you know, we were all on cost per points. And radio people, to those of you in the audience, hated cost per points because it came from television. But over the years, there's now been an attempt to blend that buying now to move everybody. TV used to be bought, network TV is bought on a cost per 1,000 basis.
Yeah.
Local TV on a cost per point. So now there's this movement, you know, which I think the agencies and clients are helping to drive on the commercial side at least, where now everything's on a cost per 1,000 basis, so there's some means of comparison there, and not this separate metric where you've got to have 5 different media buyers to buy things on a cost per point because they don't know how to buy on a cost per 1,000. So that, you know, that revolution has been going on, and I know Abby from TVB is here, and Abby, that's been going on for a while, right? We've been having that discussion, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's not, the math's not hard, you know. Almost all media buying software will show you the impressions, you know, right next to
It's only hard for sales reps, you know.
It's
It's hard for sales reps, right? Because
I mean, the problem with
embedded.
the problem with cost per point is that the size of the media market drives that. So bigger media markets always have higher cost per point, but cost per 1,000 impressions, you know, is comparable across media markets, and cost per point is not.
So are there any kind of trends that you've seen that in doing the research that you saw during the 2016 election, or that you know, are looking forward to seeing coming into 2018? Do you think it's going to be the same old that we're all used to, or is there anything kind of new?
The biggest innovation in 2016 was the increased use of network ad buys by both the Trump and the Clinton campaigns. So you're not going to see that in a midterm year, but that was really the biggest increase, because there's so many states were in play, and the key states like Ohio, or especially in smaller markets, the cost of these spots, like, you could not believe how much they were asking for these spots. You know, some of these small markets for prime time were asking a rate that was literally like a third of the network rate. It's like, why am I paying here? Let's just go buy the whole country. And that way you know, Trump supporters and fundraisers in Texas get to see the Trump ads, and Hillary supporters in California get to see her ads, and, you know, it was exciting. You know, people are running for president of the United States. So that was the biggest innovation, which is not an innovation really. I don't know what'll be different in 2018.
Yeah, you know, I think when you look at, yeah, because as I recall, 16, the Clinton campaign bought the Olympics, Trump bought the World Series on FS1, which was great considering that the Cleveland Indians were in the World Series, but of course, you know, being the Indians, they couldn't win it. But we're not going to let this frustrated ex-Clevelander talk about that too much. But it was a great way, you know, they did that. You know, the thing that you know, you may have noticed or you may have read that YouTube has come out now and said, okay, if you really want us to do a good job of guaranteeing where your ad shows up, because this has now been an issue both in the political world and in the commercial world. When the marketing director of P&G gets up and says, hey, I don't know what I'm getting here, and I don't know what I'm paying for, and I'm running in all these places I don't like, you know, you're hearing that same complaint on the political side is, you know, it's a little dangerous out there. So now YouTube is saying, okay, gotcha, if you want us to do that, we'll help you get there, but oh, by the way, you're going to pay more for it. You knew that was coming. So I'm going to be very interested to see how much brand safety is going to play an outsized role this year, because I think it exists on both sides of the aisle. It exists as much for, you know, Oarsman Chevrolet as it does for Barber Comstock or anyone else for that matter. You know, that's going to be kind of interesting to watch, I think, as we look at the digital world. I mean, there's no denying where the trends are going, and digital continues to do better with each and every cycle. You know, it's obviously dominated by the duopoly, and probably will remain that way. But still, it's hard to ignore, you know, where they were 6 years ago and where they'll be this year. So it will be interesting to see how it grows and what, you know, process improvements come along the way to help make sure that you're not running you're not running next to an ISIS video. You know, that's the kind of stuff that, you know, makes guys like Will, you know, roll in bed each and every night for months at a time. So we don't want to see that. We don't want to see that happen. So that's the thing that we're going to watch. And, you know, I think overall it's just there is so much money in the system right now that,
Not
you
that
know,
much.
I think, no,
never
of
enough.
course not. And, you know, to use the old, right, the rising tide lifts all boats. And that's what we've seen, you know, just from where we sit and watch it on the CMAG side. You know, we've watched that happen now ever since Citizens United. You know, the money in the campaigns just keep going up, 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 up. And everybody, you know, that's in the advertising game benefits from that, that's for sure.
Well, thank you so much. I want to make sure we have time to open it up for questions.
Yeah, we have time for questions, if anybody has questions.
Ready for that end.
Will, since you mentioned that the experience in digital simply is fundamentally different in many ways than TV, and especially as you start moving into things like the social feed. I mean, we're no longer in a lean-back world where people simply have to sit through an interruptive 30, but now they have the option, not just skip an ad, but simply just scroll. I'm curious if you've already seen an impact here on creative strategies, because ultimately that spend has to be amortized somehow, and you've got to figure out how much you're going to be focusing and how many creatives you make, and whether at the top you're going to be strategizing at the top for how do we create a top line message we're going to run on TV but can be parsed and cut for other media.
Yeah, well, sort of the splintering of media, you know, has put more of a burden on us on sort of the buying and planning side, but it's also put a big burden on the creative side. I mean, you still hear TV guys saying, you know, I want 1,000 GRPs to burn in my message. And I say, you can't burn in a message because people have more than 3 TV stations. You know, you're talking about an idea that's a hand-me-down, passed down through the generations from into the 70s. So the creative guys have to step up and be able to, instead of having one beautiful battleship ad that they put 2,000 points behind, they have to think differently and have smaller ads with less weight behind them. And they don't like to do that. You know, if I'm a creative TV guy, my ideal client is I make one spot and they run it the whole campaign. That way I can go make more spots for other campaigns, right?
On the digital side, you know, we rethink the way that we write the script from the very beginning. So whereas, you know, traditional TV ads, you sort of like hit them with the punchline at the end of the 30 seconds. With digital, you have to do that in the first 2 seconds.
Yeah.
You know, like that you can't beat around the bush. You've got to just like hit them with it directly. So that was a challenge it's been a challenge for us in past campaign cycles where we've been given TV spots and asked to just run it on digital. And now we're really pushing our clients to start from the beginning and from the scripts phase, really like write it differently if we know it's going to be running on digital.
My opponent is a pedophile. Now let me tell you something about myself. Do you have to get like the real hit right up front,
Yes.
you know, in the ad?
Well, that would definitely get somebody's attention, would it not? Yeah.
It cuts through the clutter.
I was going to say, I'm going to disruptive experience. There you go.
There we go. I was just wondering, as you get close to an election the last couple of weeks, do you still see, or have you already used like the 6-second spots in a World Series or a NFL game? Do you expect that to happen?
I don't know if we've bought 6-second spots. We like 15s.
I'm talking about the ones that are running over action now.
Yeah. Yeah, those the little window where you can still see what's going on in the game. I mean, we love sports for politics. Thank you, Stephen.
I was going to say, we have anybody from the sports world here by chance? No.
Radio, we got TV, we got the sports contingent.
Mostly because they give you free tickets, but we now, we love sports for politics, and especially for Republicans. It's a way to find Republican voters. In general, Democrats watch more television than Republicans do, so it's a little harder for us to find our targets. And sports turns out to be a good way to do that.
And I'm sorry, I'm not taking your role here, but why is that? I mean, is it the engagement? Is it the reach? Is it a little bit from column A and a little bit from column B? I mean,
You're talking about
why is sports so appealing?
well, because a lot of many sports skew Republican. The audience skews more Republican and high turnout. Just golf, college sports. The Olympics is in the middle, but high turnout. That's why you see presidential campaigns buying the Olympics. I mean, the Winter Olympics is probably too early. It won't really factor into the midterms, but we like sports. They're a little, they're priced a little more, maybe priced more like prime time. But, and then there's the less skipping. People watching a live event are less likely, people are less likely to DVR a sport event and skip the ads later.
Will, you mentioned before that in the last cycle, we were seeing local TV rates especially become astronomical. Mm-hmm. Did they ever get to the point where you said, maybe this isn't worth it and we could probably do at least as well with less money through digital channels than going on TV?
Well, it's, yeah, I mean, I think some of us from national media were together with the GMMB, which is the biggest Democratic agency, and we were swapping war stories and talking about, trying to tell clients to stop buying TV. That we actually tell clients to stop putting more money into TV. That you're wasting it. Go buy, let us buy you some radio or digital or put it in the field. Stop buying TV. Which just people, and the client didn't stop. He wanted to match whatever, he looked at the competitive and he wanted to match. It was in that Georgia 6 special election. There's so much TV in Atlanta, they were buying everything.
And that was geographically, that was kind of tough because that was a corner of the Atlanta DMA. It wasn't, it didn't have a lot of the same market in it. But the broadcast stations were doing. Everybody made their numbers and went on vacation, and you could find most Atlanta TV reps in the Caribbean somewhere having a great time. Hey, it's
Check
wonderful
out my
down
new
here.
Porsche.
Just yeah, exactly. Just please wire that commission check to me. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Well, that's a good way. That's a good end note in the Caribbean and talking about telling TV buyers, telling candidates to stop buying TV. Lizzie, panel, thanks very much.